founding the market was quite by accident. The market used to be part of the art market, and they had random vintage vendors in the art market, and then the art market got too big to accommodate vintage vendors. And I was, at the time, blogging. This was probably like 12 years ago, 11. I was blogging. When I say blogging, I was really more sending out emails, because Mark will laugh when I say I was blogging. I'm not really a good blogger. But I was marketing my business through constant contact and sending out emails, getting people to come see me at the market where I was selling. That got the attention of the owners of the building and all the stuff that was happening, and they invited me to curate a vintage market.
So I was probably born into it, family of like trash pickers and whatnot. And then I started in a vintage clothing store when I was 17. And I did that for a few years, and then I went to another clothing store in Boston when I was like 19. And then I sold shoes, and then I sold furniture. And then I got let go from my job a year and a half ago, and I moved in here the next day.
Well, I've been collecting vintage clothing for about 28 years. I grew up in Central California, and I started collecting when I was a teenager. And I started reselling and trading clothes in the big city vintage stores, like in San Francisco and Santa Cruz. And when I moved to Vermont 20 years ago, I continued to collect vintage, and I have a vintage clothing store in Vermont, in a small little town in southern Vermont in Bellows Falls called Anastasia's Closet. And I also travel around and sell vintage at shows like this in the cities and online.
I love vintage stuff, and I love fashion, so I just like finding it and saving it and passing it on to someone else.
Well, I love textiles of all sorts. I like prints and fabrics, and in terms of vintage, I love the quality and the uniqueness of vintage. You can't buy the quality of vintage clothing anymore. Things aren't tailored the same. They're not made of fabrics that are as high quality. They're made to be disposed of and thrown away, whereas vintage has been kept and cared for years and meant to last generations.
You look at the vintage clothing, they were actually designed by people that loved fashion and loved the outfits and loved the material and loved the design. And there's so many little details by like people that you don't know that are constructed just as well, if not better, than something that's like $1,000 at Barney's right now.
It's sometimes a rescue mission. Like I bought something yesterday, and someone was like, "You're not going to make that much money on that." And I said, "No, I know, but it's so beautiful, and I want to rescue this vintage piece." So I know somebody will give it life, and it's really not about making the most money that I could make. It's about not having this piece, which should continue to live and provide enjoyment for somebody, not having it go in a landfill.